There's nothing quite like the NFL draft. It is a time of hope and excitement. Every team out there is one or two players away from being a contender. It's the single moment on the football calendar where the professional and college games intersect. That's despite there being no games played at all for one weekend. In every April, pigskin is paramount. Truthfully speaking, it does not make a lick of sense on the surface. It's just football executives in suits selecting college players. And for decades, the hype or lack thereof around the NFL draft reflected that reality. Then, something changed. A general increase of interest in the NFL, along with the wild ambitions of a nascent cable television network, willing to air anything even remotely related to sports, were the springboard for unexpected success. I am Cheyenne Hollis, this is the Touchbag, and here is how the NFL Draft became football's most anticipated event.
The Oakland Raiders select Sebastian Janikowski, kicker, Florida State.
The first NFL Draft in history took place on February 8th, 1936 in Philadelphia at a Ritz-Carlton hotel. Ooh la la, how fancy. Only 21 of the 84 players taken that day went on to play professionally in the NFL. That's not because teams were picking busts or anything like that. In fact, most of the players opted not to pursue an NFL career because they could make more money doing something else with their lives. The first 30 years of the NFL draft were not really for public consumption. The event changed locations, number of rounds, and even when it was held on the calendar pretty often during this time. It was held as early as November and as late as April in some cases. During the latter stages of the 1950s, the NFL would actually hold the first handful of rounds in late November or early December, and then the last 25 or so would take place more than a month later in January. It wasn't until 1965 when the NFL would build the foundations for what would become the modern draft we know today. That year would see New York City become the host of the event, a title it would not relinquish for 50 years. Another important change happened in 1968 when the draft switched to a multi-day format on a permanent basis. Finding the right day on the calendar to schedule the NFL draft, well, that wouldn't come until the late 1970s. The draft was held in April 1976, the first time in 30 years it took place at that late of a date in the year. 1977 saw the first May draft in NFL history, and since then it has either taken place in late April or early May on a few different occasions. The reason the draft ended up getting pushed back by front office personnel was due to improvements in scouting. Around this time, teams began inviting prospects to their headquarters, conducting physicals and interviews, really adding a professional element to the process which did not exist for the longest time. Having this extra time really allowed teams to collect information. Let's not forget, it was really difficult for teams to conduct college scouting during the NFL season because obviously all of their focus was going on what they were doing with their teams. But by having a few months after the season ended, they could really start to build things like draft boards. They would stop really just picking blindly based on whatever footage happened to be out there. That being said, the NFL draft itself was still very much an afterthought as the 1970s came to a close. It was basically nothing more than a bunch of dudes hanging out in a hotel ballroom, smoking like crazy, making trades, and selecting players they hoped would help their teams in the long run. Some media folks were there to report on activities. There were some cameras, some photographers in that, but it really wasn't a big deal. In fact, it was just held during 2 random weekdays. For football fans, what happened during the draft would just be something you would read about later on in your local newspaper covering the team. Everything would change in 1980. That is when ESPN approached then NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle about broadcasting the NFL draft. It was a plan seen as very radical at the time. No one had ever given much thought to the draft as an event. But for ESPN, they honestly didn't care. They just wanted some content related to the big professional sports leagues since they didn't have any rights to broadcast the games themselves. It was really seen as sort of a relationship building exercise and just a way for them to fill programming time. Anyway, Rozelle would put the idea up for a vote amongst the owners, who unanimously rejected the plan because they didn't really want to give screen time to agents, and that's what they felt was going to happen should the NFL draft be broadcast on television. The vote itself, though, was actually irrelevant. The commissioner had decided the league was going to do it anyway. Of course, before becoming commissioner of the NFL, Rozelle had a huge background in sports marketing, and he knew firsthand that any publicity was too good to pass up, especially during a time in the year when no one was really talking about the sport. According to a Sports Illustrated article by Craig Ellenport, who thankfully is a real person and not some AI bot, the commission's workaround was to let ESPN broadcast the draft as sort of a news report. The majority of the network's coverage would be from their own studios, but they could have camera guys and people at the NFL draft doing cut-ins and interviews and sort of making it seem like they were there, they had a presence there without it being broadcast from the draft itself. This is where the NFL draft begins to grow and evolve into something a lot larger. Despite the owner's initial rejection of the idea, it turns out everyone kinda liked being on TV, and this allowed ESPN to expand its coverage of the draft. For example, in those early years of its NFL draft broadcast, ESPN would only show the first day of proceedings, and even then, sometimes they wouldn't even show all of it, but they would continue to build on that, show more of it, and by 1993, every last draft pick that happened in the draft was shown on ESPN. Because the NFL draft does not fit in a short 1 to 2 hour block, it's 6, 8, 9, whatever many hours it happens to take, ESPN would convince those in NFL offices to move it from the weekdays it had been organized on to the weekend in 1988, meaning more people could sit down and watch the NFL draft live. There weren't a lot of people who could take time off work to watch the NFL draft, which was starting at noon on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. It was really just seen as a way to make the NFL draft into destination viewing. A change of venue in 1986 saw the draft take up residency in New York City's Marriott Marquis. By the way, why anyone would want to organize their event that close to Times Square is pretty baffling. There were plenty of other places in New York City that could have hosted the event, but they chose Times Square for reasons. The one thing this location did have going for it was a ballroom with a balcony that allowed for fans to come in and finally watch the proceedings in person. This was a game changer, and we'll get back to what happened here in a bit, but first we need to travel back to 1984. It is here where the world is introduced to the first NFL draft expert, Mel Kyper Jr. I know, dude is an extremely divisive figure. A lot of folks out there hate him, some do like him, but to me, there's no denying the impact he had on the NFL draft as an event. He really started to add substance to the coverage of this event. Did Kyper get it wrong? Absolutely he did, quite a bit. Was he used by teams to spread false information? Absolutely he was. But at this time, he was really the only person out there able to serve as an information bridge for viewers between college football and the NFL. More importantly, he blazed a trail. He made it possible for other individuals to have careers as NFL draft content creators. That is pretty freaking cool if you ask me. But since no one is asking me, let's move on. You can hate these folks, you can say they're wrong, you can say they don't know what they're talking about, but without their existence, the NFL draft does not become the event it is today. Having specialists there who weren't working for NFL teams or college coaches or agents or someone connected to what was happening there really gave the draft an extra level of importance, and it provided just more details, a bigger, better understanding of the entire picture of the draft for viewers and those following it. It also allowed for more fan engagement.
Atlanta selects Andre Bruce, linebacker Auburn.
People could agree or disagree with what a team was doing. You could have opinions on the draft for once. The entire thing would become a jumping off point, something we talk about for weeks, months. I mean, honestly, the NFL draft is basically a 12-month topic these days. This brings us to the 1987 NFL draft and the moment that would help create the atmosphere of the modern draft as we know it today. The New York Jets are on the clock when Pete Rozelle moseys on up to the podium and gives us this legendary draft moment.
New York Jets first round selection, fullback.
The oh no heard around the NFL world. There's been plenty of coverage on this single moment over the years. Jaguar Gator 9 has an entire video on it that I'll link to in the description below. But I want to focus on its significance as far as making the NFL draft a spectacle, an event that people look forward to and want to be a part of. This moment is really the zenith of the interactive NFL draft experience, where fans are as much a part of the proceedings as any of the other actors. And from this point onward, you really see the ESPN broadcast doing more to get fans involved. It goes from being this football procedural meeting to this fun thing people want to be a part of and they want to watch because they don't necessarily know what's going to happen. It's also during the late 1980s and early 1990s that ESPN begins to capture the drama and intrigue that the NFL draft has. You never knew what to expect. You never knew exactly what would happen at the NFL draft. And that, of course, is the crux of all good forms of entertainment. In 1995, the NFL moved the draft to the theater at Madison Square Garden in order to accommodate more fans. It moved to the Javits Convention Center in 2005 before landing at Radio City Music Hall, where it stayed until 2014. During this 20-year spell, the NFL draft really began to grow, and it really happened alongside the growth of the NFL as a whole. With more college football on television, it really allowed fans to sink their teeth into the event. For better or worse, everyone could sort of be a quasi-expert on the draft. At the very least, they all had their own opinions as far as what teams should do. And of course, during this time, attendance continues to grow. It becomes a pretty tough ticket to obtain. Hoping to capitalize on the popularity of the NFL draft, the first primetime 3-day event took place in 2010. And in 2015, they finally took the show on the road, starting with Chicago and then hosting it in NFL cities across America. Oh yeah, we also got that really crappy Kevin Costner movie where he makes a bunch of trades that not even Madden AI would accept. These days, hundreds of thousands of people come out to watch the NFL draft in person, millions more watch on television, and who knows just how many terrible mock drafts there are floating around the internet at any given moment in time. So how did we get here? How did the NFL draft become football's most anticipated event? Well, I think it starts by the time of year. This moment, late April, early May, is when every NFL fan can dream a little bit. We are far enough removed from the previous season so that fans of any team out there can think that with the right rookies, the right picks, they could be a contender or have the building blocks in place for their franchise to have success in the years to come. And for the teams that are good, it's simply either getting to another level or filling out the roster with players who may have left in free agency. There's just something entertaining or important for all teams involved. There's also the natural chaos the NFL draft brings. It's wild. It's hectic. There's just something inherently entertaining about watching this play out, either in person or on television. Speaking of television, we must give credit to ESPN for putting this thing on the TV, as well as those within football for seeing its value and helping the network build it up over the years. This is an idea that could have easily been shut down at any point during the 1980s. You know, those first years of the draft, they weren't huge rating success. There wasn't money to be made in it, but they let this thing grow organically and it became the success that it is today. This is not meant to diminish the Super Bowl playoffs or regular seasons, which we all look forward to, but there is just something so exciting about this moment of the NFL calendar, this time of the year, that really can't be found anywhere else. It's a time of excitement, it's a time of renewal, it's a time for what if and fun. Now, if only the networks covering the draft would stop running puff pieces and crosstalk about the day one picks and announce those 6-rounders as they happen. I know it ain't gonna happen, but hey, no harm in asking. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know a little bit more about the game Vince Lombardi, once referred to as the Shit Bowl, video upper right hand corner of your screen is the place to go. And for more NFL content, playlist lower right hand of the screen is where you can check it out. Until next time, I'm Shane Hollis. This is the Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.
Fullback. Roger Vick, Texas A&M.